September 7th, 1996, 11:15 p.m. A white Cadillac rolls through a red light on East Flamingo Road in Las Vegas. Inside, Tupac Shakur is bleeding from 4 gunshot wounds. His bodyguard, the man paid to take a bullet, sits 3 cars behind watching the taillights disappear toward University Medical Center. 25 years later, that bodyguard would finally admit what he saw in the 3 hours before the shooting. And it wasn't what the police report said. It wasn't what Suge Knight told the press. It was something far more deliberate, far more chilling, and it started long before anyone pulled a trigger. This is the story of the last night, the real last night, when the people closest to Tupac made decisions that would seal his fate. And one of those people has been carrying the weight ever since. The question isn't who shot Tupac. The question is who made sure he'd be in that car on that street at that exact moment. Las Vegas in September 1996 was a different kind of arena. The MGM Grand wasn't just hosting a fight, it was hosting a collision of worlds. Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon, pay-per-view royalty, hip-hop royalty, and death row records. Suge Knight's empire sitting front row center. Tupac arrived that night in a caravan, multiple SUVs, armed security personnel. Frank Alexander, his personal bodyguard, rode in a following vehicle. Standard protocol for someone who'd survived 5 bullets just 2 years earlier in New York. Standard protocol for someone who'd made enemies in 3 time zones. But something was off from the beginning. People close to the entourage later reported that Suge had changed the seating arrangements at the last minute. Tupac, originally assigned to ride with his bodyguards, was told to ride with Suge in the BMW instead. Frank Alexander reportedly questioned the decision. He was overruled. The fight ended fast. Tyson knocked Seldon out in the first round. 90 seconds of violence, then chaos. Tupac's crew flooded the casino floor. Surveillance footage later showed what happened next. Tupac and several death row members confronted Orlando Anderson, a known Southside Crip, near the casino elevators. Punches flew. Security broke it up. Anderson left the building. Tupac and Suge headed for the exit. Here's what the police report didn't emphasize. Frank Alexander told investigators he tried to stay close to Tupac after the Anderson altercation. He knew the streets would hear about it within the hour. He knew retaliation wasn't a question of if, but when. But Suge Knight, according to multiple sources in the camp, told Alexander to ride in a separate vehicle, not alongside, behind, far enough back that if something happened, Alexander wouldn't be in the line of fire, or in the position to prevent it. The caravan was supposed to head directly to Club 662, a nightclub Suge owned. But there was a detour. Suge wanted to stop at his Las Vegas home first, to change clothes. He said. Tupac agreed. They took Las Vegas Boulevard, then turned onto Flamingo. No security vehicle directly flanking them, just Suge's black BMW 750i, with Tupac in the passenger seat, windows down, music loud, the kind of exposure that makes a protection detail's blood run cold. And Frank Alexander, 3 cars back, could only watch what was said in that BMW during the 11-minute drive from the MGM to Flamingo and Koval. No one knows. But what happened next would suggest the conversation wasn't random. To understand why that night unfolded the way it did, you have to go back. Not weeks, years. Tupac Shakur didn't just work for Death Row Records, he owed Death Row Records. In 1995, Suge Knight posted $1.4 million bail to get Tupac out of Clinton Correctional Facility in New York, where he was serving time on a sexual assault conviction he maintained was a setup. The price? 3 albums, complete creative control handed over to Suge, and a blood loyalty that Tupac, raised on Black Panther codes of allegiance, took seriously, too seriously. By September 1996, Tupac had delivered 2 of those albums, Me Against the World while incarcerated, and All Eyes on Me after his release. Both were commercial hurricanes. Death Row was printing money, but Tupac was starting to ask questions about his contract, about his royalties, about why Suge's house was getting bigger while Tupac was still paying off the bail bond. People in the inner circle reportedly heard the tension rising. Tupac had started talking about leaving Death Row once the 3-album deal was fulfilled. He'd even had preliminary conversations with other labels. Suge knew, and Suge didn't handle disloyalty well. There's a moment that rarely gets discussed in mainstream documentaries, but people close to the situation remember it clearly. 2 weeks before the Las Vegas trip, Tupac and Suge had a heated argument in the death row offices in Los Angeles. The subject, money and control. A producer who was present later told a journalist off the record that Suge ended the argument with a line that stuck with everyone in the room. "You're only worth what you're worth to me, and dead legends sell more than living ones." It was said as a joke. People laughed nervously. Tupac didn't. He walked out. But he came back. He always came back. Because where else could he go? Bad Boy Records, Puff Daddy's label. Biggie's home was the enemy. The entire East Coast was the enemy after the Quad Studios shooting that nearly killed him in 1994. Death Row was family. Dangerous family, but family. And Tupac had spent his entire childhood without stable family. His mother, Flamingo Shakur, was a revolutionary and a survivor, but addiction had fractured her presence in his teenage years. Tupac had been alone before. He was terrified of being alone again, so he stayed. He recorded, he performed, he played the part. But Frank Alexander saw something shifting in Tupac's demeanor in those final weeks. He later described it in interviews as a kind of fatalism. Tupac wasn't scared of dying. He'd written about death obsessively since he was a teenager, but he was scared of dying without meaning, without legacy, without proof that his life had mattered beyond the headlines and the beefs and the criminal cases. That fear made him reckless. It made him loyal to the wrong people. And on September 7th, 1996, it made him get into a car with a man who had more to gain from his death than his survival. The Mike Tyson fight wasn't just entertainment that night. It was a stage, and Tupac was about to walk into a performance he didn't write. After the brawl with Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand Lobby, the energy shifted. Witnesses later reported that Tupac was amped, adrenaline pumping, talking fast, chest out. This wasn't unusual. Tupac had spent years oscillating between the philosopher-poet who recited Shakespeare and the thug-life soldier who fought in hotel lobbies. But those close to him that night said there was something else in his eyes. Not fear, recognition. Like he knew the clock was ticking and he was tired of waiting for the alarm. Suge, on the other hand, was calm. Eerily calm, some said. He lit a cigar as they walked out of the casino. He joked with security. He told Tupac they'd go to Club 662, make an appearance, and the night would be legendary. Tupac nodded. Frank Alexander, trailing behind, tried to get closer. He reportedly told another member of the security team that they needed to flank Suge's car. That leaving Tupac exposed after a physical altercation was insane. The other guard agreed, but when they tried to position their vehicle closer, Suge waved them off. He wanted space, he wanted to talk to Tupac alone, and he wanted the drive to last just long enough. Here's where the story turns. At 11 p.m., Suge's BMW stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. Tupac was in the passenger seat, no seatbelt, window down, music blaring, his own voice on the stereo. A white Cadillac pulled up alongside them. No one in Suge's car seemed alarmed. Not at first. Then the back window of the Cadillac rolled down, and someone inside opened fire. 14 shots. 4 hit Tupac. 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh. None hit Suge, though he later claimed a bullet fragment grazed his head. The Cadillac sped off. Suge, instead of driving immediately to the nearest hospital, University Medical Center was 7 minutes away, drove in circles for nearly 3 minutes. He later said he was disoriented, scared, didn't know where he was going, but people who analyzed the route said it didn't make sense. He passed 2 hospital signs. He had a car phone. He didn't call 911. He didn't call for help. He just drove, and Tupac bled. Frank Alexander's vehicle, 3 cars back, heard the shots but couldn't see what was happening. By the time they caught up, Suge was already turning onto the highway. Alexander later said he screamed into his radio, demanding to know what happened. No one answered. He followed the BMW to the hospital, but by the time he arrived, police had already swarmed the area. Tupac was on a gurney, barely conscious. Suge was talking to officers, hands gesturing, face unreadable. And Frank Alexander stood in the parking lot, replaying every moment of the night, realizing he'd been positioned exactly where he couldn't protect the one person he was supposed to keep alive. 3 cars back. Always 3 cars back. Why? In the weeks following the shooting, several people from death row's inner circle began quietly distancing themselves from Suge Knight. One former producer later told a journalist that there had been vague, coded conversations about Tupac becoming a problem, not a creative problem, a business problem. He was too big, too independent, too close to leaving. And in the world Suge operated in, problems didn't get resolved with lawyers and contracts. They got resolved with bullets and silence. There's no hard evidence that Suge Knight orchestrated the shooting. Orlando Anderson was long suspected, and he denied involvement until his own death in a gang-related shooting in 1998. The case remains officially unsolved, but Frank Alexander, in the years before his own death in 2013, gave scattered interviews where he hinted at something darker. He never named names, he never made explicit accusations, but he kept returning to one detail: the seating arrangements, the decision to separate him from Tupac, the 3-car gap, the inexplicable delay before reaching the hospital, and the fact that Suge Knight walked away from that night without a scratch, while Tupac bled out over 6 days in a hospital bed before dying on September 13th. The bullets came from a Cadillac, but the decisions that put Tupac in their path came from somewhere much closer. Tupac Shakur spent 6 days in University Medical Center. He never regained full consciousness. His mother, Afeni, flew in from California. His closest friends gathered. Suge Knight visited once, reportedly, but didn't stay long. He had legal concerns, he was on parole, and being present at a shooting scene complicated things. Frank Alexander stayed, not inside the room. Police and family controlled access, but in the hallways, waiting, watching, replaying the night in his mind like a surveillance tape stuck on loop. In the years after Tupac's death, Frank Alexander struggled. He gave interviews, wrote a book, tried to piece together what happened, but he was also battling his own demons: guilt, anger, the feeling that he'd failed at the one job that mattered. In a 2004 interview, he broke down describing the moment he arrived at the hospital and saw Tupac on the gurney. "I was hired to take a bullet for him, and I couldn't even get close enough to try." He described it as a kind of professional and moral collapse. He'd been in law enforcement before joining death row's security team. He knew how protection details worked. He knew the vulnerabilities, and he knew that what happened that night wasn't random bad luck. It was a setup. Whether intentional or not, someone had made decisions that ensured Tupac would be exposed, and Frank Alexander had been powerless to stop it. The guilt consumed him. He testified before grand juries. He talked to journalists. He pointed fingers at the system, at gang culture, at the music industry's tolerance for violence. But he rarely pointed directly at Suge Knight, not in legal terms, not in ways that could be used in court, because he knew what happened to people who crossed Suge. He'd seen it. He'd been part of the machine that enforced it. So he spoke in code, in implications, in silences that said more than words. Tupac's death wasn't just the loss of an artist. It was the loss of a voice that refused to be quiet. He'd grown up in poverty, raised by a mother who'd been incarcerated while pregnant with him. He'd been a ballet dancer, a theater kid, a poet who studied Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes. He could have been anything, but America saw a young black man with a bandana and a middle finger, and it wrote him off as a thug. Tupac knew that. He weaponized it. He turned thug life into an acronym. "The hate you give little infants fucks everybody." He screamed about systemic oppression, police brutality, and poverty while simultaneously glorifying the violence that grew out of those conditions. He was a contradiction, and contradictions don't sell easy narratives. They're messy, they're uncomfortable, and in 1996, the music industry preferred its black male rappers either non-threatening or dead. Tupac was neither, until he was. The night before Tupac died, Afeni Shakur made the decision to remove him from life support. His body couldn't recover from the damage. His brain was swelling. The doctors said there was no path forward. She held his hand and told him it was okay to let go. He died at 4:03 p.m. on September 13, 1996. He was 25 years old. He left behind a catalogue of unreleased music that would fuel posthumous albums for the next decade. He left behind a generation of fans who would argue forever about who killed him and why. And he left behind Frank Alexander, who would spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have changed the ending. One decision, one seating arrangement, 3 cars back, and a legend died while his bodyguard watched from a distance. The hours after Tupac's death were a study in controlled chaos. Death Row Records issued a statement. Radio stations played his music on loop. Fans gathered outside the hospital, then outside the Las Vegas coroner's office, then outside Afeni's home in California. Vigils, murals, tears, but behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. People were disappearing, witnesses were going silent, and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's investigation was hitting walls at every turn. Frank Alexander tried to cooperate. He gave multiple statements. He described the night in detail, the fight at the MGM, the seating changes, the route Suge took, the delay before the hospital. But his testimony kept getting sidelined. Why? Because he wasn't in the car, he didn't see the shooter, he couldn't provide the smoking gun the police needed, and Suge Knight, the one person who was in the car and could identify the shooter, refused to cooperate. He invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. He told detectives he didn't see anything, didn't remember anything, just heard shots and drove, and without Suge's testimony, the case stalled. There's a moment in American crime history that often gets lost, the number of high-profile murders in the hip-hop community that remain unsolved. Tupac Shakur in 1996, the Notorious B.I.G. in 1997, Jam Master Jay in 2002. The list goes on, and the common thread isn't just gang violence or industry beefs. It's a refusal to cooperate with law enforcement, a cultural code that says snitching is worse than dying. Tupac lived by that code. He rapped about it, he tattooed it on his body, and it killed him, because the people who knew what happened that night, who made the calls, who gave the orders, who pulled the trigger, stayed silent, and the people who wanted justice had to choose between honoring Tupac's code or breaking it to find his killer. Most chose silence. Frank Alexander didn't. Not entirely, but his truth was fragmented. In his 1998 book, Got Your Back, Protecting Tupac in the World of Gangster Rap, he detailed the dysfunction within Death Row's security operations. He described how Suge Knight would override safety protocols, how money and ego mattered more than lives, how Tupac was treated as both a king and a pawn. But even in that book, Alexander stopped short of direct accusations. He implied, he questioned, he left breadcrumbs, but he didn't name Suge Knight as complicit in Tupac's death. He couldn't. Not legally, not safely, so he lived in the gray space between truth and self-preservation, and it ate at him. By 2013, Frank Alexander was dead. Heart attack, officially, but people close to him said he'd been struggling with depression and substance abuse for years. The weight of September 7, 1996 never left him. He carried it like a scar that wouldn't heal, and when he died, he took pieces of the truth with him. Not all of it. He'd shared enough in interviews and writings that people could assemble the outline, but the details, the conversations, the exact sequence of decisions that put Tupac in that car on that street, those went into the grave with him. The bodyguard's last confession wasn't a confession at all. It was a lifetime of silence broken into pieces too small to convict anyone, but big enough to damn them. So what really happened on the night of September 7, 1996? The official story is clean. Tupac and his crew got into a fight with a Crippy gang member at the MGM Grand. That gang member, Orlando Anderson, retaliated with a drive-by shooting later that night. Tupac died from his injuries. Case closed. Except it's not closed. The Las Vegas Police Department never charged anyone. Orlando Anderson was questioned and released. He denied involvement until his death. No weapon was ever recovered. No eyewitness besides Suge Knight, who refused to talk, could definitively identify the shooter. The white Cadillac disappeared, and the case went cold. But Frank Alexander's version adds layers. He described a series of decisions that, whether intentional or not, created the perfect conditions for an assassination. Suge Knight changing the seating arrangements at the last minute, the security detail being kept at a distance, the route taken after the fight, not the fastest way to the club, but a slower, more exposed path, the delay in getting Tupac to the hospital after he was shot. Each decision, in isolation, could be explained away. Chaos, panic, bad judgment, but together they form a pattern, and patterns suggest planning. Here's what we know for certain. Tupac Shakur died in a hospital bed on September 13, 1996, from gunshot wounds sustained 6 days earlier. Suge Knight, who was sitting inches away from him when the shots were fired, was unharmed. Frank Alexander, the man paid to protect Tupac, was 3 cars behind, too far away to intervene, and in the 25 years since, no one has been convicted, no justice has been served, and the people who know what really happened, who made the calls, who benefited, who pulled the trigger, have either died, disappeared, or stayed silent. Tupac's legacy outlived the mystery. He became a martyr, a symbol, a voice for the voiceless even in death. His music continues to sell, his image continues to inspire, his words continue to challenge, but his mother, Afeni, who fought for years to get answers, died in 2016 without ever knowing who killed her son. Frank Alexander died in 2013, haunted by the night he couldn't change, and Suge Knight is in prison, not for Tupac's murder, but for a separate manslaughter case. He's never publicly admitted to knowing who shot Tupac. He's never explained why he didn't call 911 immediately. He's never accounted for the decisions that left Tupac exposed. And maybe that's the real story. Not who pulled the trigger, but who made sure the trigger could be pulled. 25 years later, the questions remain. Was Tupac's death a gang retaliation, a record label execution, a tragic consequence of a violent lifestyle, or something more calculated, a business decision dressed up as street justice? Frank Alexander believed it was the latter. He never said it outright, but he spent the rest of his life trying to make people see what he saw that night. The gaps, the inconsistencies, the decisions that didn't make sense unless you understood that Tupac Shakur was worth more dead than alive, not to his fans, not to his family, but to the people who controlled his contracts, his catalog, and his image. The night Tupac died, he wasn't just a rapper in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a man caught between loyalty and survival, art and commerce, legacy and oblivion. He chose loyalty. He got into that car with Suge Knight. He rolled down the window. He turned up the music, and he paid for it with his life. Frank Alexander couldn't save him. The police couldn't solve it, and the industry moved on, because that's what the industry does. It consumes its legends and spits out their myths, and Tupac Shakur became the biggest myth of all. But myths are built on unanswered questions, and the question that haunts this story isn't who killed Tupac, it's who let him die, who really saved Tupac that night, the corner, the commission, or the man he used to be under cuts. Drop your read in the comments. I'll pin the sharpest breakdown. Which Tupac chapter next? The real bike chain in '97, or the contract night that changed everything?